Pipelines are the most reliable way to move fluids between two locations, and coincidentally, they're also the most reliable way to drive Satisfactory players absolutely insane. Last time I spent dozens of hours using pipelines to produce and burn fuel at 100% efficiency. And since you all like this kind of build demonstration plus practical advice, I'm back with another fluid management challenge. How do we deal with water as a byproduct? If any of your machines produces an item byproduct that you do not need, you can just shove it into an awesome sink. But there's no easy way to sink a fluid like water, so we need to use it somewhere else or send it back to our input site. Several methods have been suggested to do this. Today I will be testing 4 of them, ranging from very easy and obvious to quite sophisticated. Along the way I will show you why byproducts are such a problem in the first place. The 2 most common occurrences of water byproducts are in aluminum production and when reprocessing uranium waste. Since I have my power needs figured out for now, I will focus on aluminum today. I also wanted to do a really big build for a while, so maybe I can use this to get that kind of energy out of my system. Anyway, enough talk. Let's get started. Come to think of it, there probably won't be any outlets for my PC around here. Let's do this at my place instead. All right. I was going to go into much more detail about how I planned this build, but let's keep this focused on fluid management. Here's the 30-second rundown. Just producing a bunch of aluminum ingots or alclad sheets sounded like a boring idea, so I decided to build something slightly more complex. Batteries. The most that you can make in the game is 4,560 per minute. If you want to reproduce this plan at home, enable all alternate recipes except for 1. Diluted packaged fuel. No idea why it's preferring that over straight diluted fuel. And 2. Caterium wire, because copper is just much easier to get than caterium. Also, I disabled the standard copper ingot recipe to make it use copper alloy ingot, which needs only half the copper ore. And now, to get back on track, let's understand why fluid backflow is tricky in the first place.
Oh dear. Is he going to bring out the whiteboard again?
For this, we're going to bring out the whiteboard again. We have a production step that dissolves a material in water. For aluminum production, that's bauxite turning into alumina solution, and for uranium waste reprocessing, it would be sulfur turning into sulfuric acid. The next step down the line recovers some of that water. We want to feed this byproduct back into the first step and only take in as much fresh water as needed. What we need to avoid is the freshwater intake flowing too fast. This would block the consumption of byproduct water. And once this refinery's output buffer is filled, it cannot keep going anymore, and then this also gets backlogged and the entire system deadlocks. I actually saw this happening during my experiments. You will see in a bit which one of the possible solutions failed this catastrophically. But first, let's meet our contestants. To the holographic projection room.
We don't have the budget for stuff like this.
Then how come we have budget for an intercom?
This is not an intercom. You're adding this in post.
Okay, makes sense. Let's just use in-game footage then. The basic idea for our first 2 candidates is to merge byproduct water and fresh water in a way that favors the byproduct. There is no priority junction item in the game, but fortunately for us, other people have already proposed their own designs for us to test. First up is an old friend, the Fix-It Incorporated Plumbing Manual by McGalleon, link in the description. This guide is a must-read for anyone who wants to conquer fluid mechanics in Satisfactory. In fact, it describes in passing 2 of the other options that I will be detailing shortly. Then, near the end, page 16 includes the design for the VIP junction. The VIP stands for Variable Input Priority. I'm sorry, I always stumble on the word priority. It's like how when Americans say temperature instead of temperature. I just end up skipping some vowels, which I guess is fine. I'm German, so I prefer consonants anyway. Let's get back to the VIP junction though. I built it exactly as it's shown in the manual. The manual says that the lowest input will be favored, so that one is hooked up to the byproduct water. The other input where the fresh water comes in goes over a bump before it enters the output side of the junction. The problem is I'm a bit stuck at saying the manual says that. I do not actually understand how this junction is supposed to work, and the manual doesn't go into much detail. I have a guess though. On the same page, right below the VIP junction, there is also the variable output priority junction. This one is very obvious to me because it's just based on how pipes fill up. If there's only little input, only the lower portion of the junction will fill up and only the lower output will receive fluid. Then once there is lots of input, or if the lower output is clogged, the fluid level will rise and the second output will start receiving fluid. My guess was that the VIP junction would work in a different but similar way. If the upper pipe is not fully filled, it would operate at a lower work pressure and let less water flow through, causing the lower input to be favored. But as you can see here, that's not the case. Every time I looked, all the pipes were always full. So clearly this design eludes me right now, but maybe we'll understand what's going on once we see the junction deal with all the challenges of my test gauntlet. For now, we have another candidate design to look at. This other design has actually been recommended to me by a viewer. Commenting on my previous video, Reddit user Cytherin responds to my troubles with merging crude oil from multiple sources, writing, "I'm curious if rather than valves, an unpowered pump would provide the prevention of backflow without adding the issue of valves clogging when their lines are drained. It is the one piece of the puzzle the pipeline manual does not have and has been somewhat of a miracle fix for any fluid problem I've discovered, even allowing for the problematic bottom fed designs. So I'm curious of your take on it." And then they link to another post by Reddit user Jinky Rain, who appears to be the original creator of our second design as far as I can tell. This design does not have a proper name like the VIP junction, so I put headlift reset on this sign here, and now I'm just going to stick with this name for consistency's sake. So what is happening here is that we merge fresh water and byproduct water together with a straight junction cross. And to ensure that byproduct water gets favored, the fresh water is run through an unpowered pump. Unpowered pumps let fluids flow through just fine, but the headlift is reset to 0, so the water from this side comes in with less pressure. The magic part of this design is the fluid buffer in the loop. It doesn't matter where we put it as long as it's somewhere around this junction. When both fresh water and byproduct water are coming in faster than the output can consume it, the excess will start filling the buffer. As the level in the buffer rises, eventually more and more pressure is required to keep filling it further. Because this unpowered pump acts as a pressure limiter, the fresh water will eventually be stopped by this pressure. Ultimately, we arrive at a stable state where the pressure is just high enough that all the water supply and consumption balance each other out. As you can see here, this equilibrium appears to occur around a fill level of 1800 to 1900 cubic meters in the buffer. Since this industrial fluid buffer is 12 meters high, this corresponds to a fill level of just over 9 meters. This is why we need to use the industrial fluid buffer here. Its smaller brother, the regular fluid buffer, is only 8 meters tall, so it would not provide the required pressure even at full capacity. Alright, that's 2 out of 4 candidates down. We should be at about 4 minutes in the video. Oh no! For real though, I've come to understand why every description of fluid dynamics in this game is structured as a guide instead of going into the actual details of how the simulation works. Even after reading just about every resource I could find, from PDFs to Discord threads to YouTube videos and dev streams, I still do not have a solid grasp on how the fluid simulation actually works. Case in point, is headlift the same as work pressure? Even the plumbing manual disagrees with itself here. The day that I wanted to finish up this script, I fell into another rabbit hole trying to use the debug views for pipeline flow and pressure levels that are supposedly in the game. None of them helped me in any way, so after 5 hours I decided to cut my losses and move on. If any one of you knows how to get these debug views working, please drop a comment. That would be hugely appreciated. But at this point I think my only option to truly understand all of this would be to write my own debug mod. And even though I'm a software developer, I have not worked with modern game engines yet, so this would be another huge rabbit hole that I'm probably just going to avoid for my own sanity's sake. Anyway, let's move quicker for the last 2 candidates. Next up, from the department of surely it cannot be that easy. If we consume 600 cubic meters per minute of water and then get 360 back, why not just use a valve to limit our intake of fresh water to 240? Looks good to me, but let's see how it does. I'm including this one because I want to see one of the candidates just outright fail on one of the challenges. And given how much more sophisticated the other designs are, this is probably going to be the weakest link. And finally, every good experiment needs a control group. A candidate that is so boring and by the numbers that we know exactly how it will behave before the challenge has even begun. In the merge list design, we just do not merge byproduct water and fresh water together at all. Instead, we have some refineries taking in only fresh water and some others taking only byproduct water. Because fluid flows never compete with each other at a merging junction, it is literally impossible for this design to get stuck. The major trade-off here is that we need one more set of refineries. Because our inputs of 240 and 360 are not neat multiples of 200, we need to split the center refinery into 2 running at 20% and 80% respectively. If you do not care about the increased space usage, stop the video right here and go with this design. It will serve you well. If you want to know the most efficient solution though, stick around while we enter the Thunderdome. Yeah, understood. Okay, I'm being told we don't have the budget for a Thunderdome, so the whiteboard will have to do. Wait, who even called? You have already seen glimpses of the test setups, but here it is again. All 4 designs are built out next to each other. The inputs are wired up to ample supplies of bauxite ore and coal, and the aluminum scrap outputs are just stuffed into sinks. The first challenge is a simple endurance trial. We let all 4 designs run for a decently long time and then check the efficiency rating on the machine's UI. Anything less than 99 or 100% is a failing grade. I chose 2 hours as the test time, and actually I'm running this test twice. You already saw the first run where I stayed close by. For the second run, I moved my Pioneer to the far side of the map. I know that the game will slow down the animation of faraway machines, so I wanted to see if this effect also applies to the simulation instead of just the visuals. For both runs, I just let the game do its thing for 2 hours and then came back to check the results. As you can see from the efficiency displays, each candidate passes with flying colors. This footage is from the run with close by Pioneer, but the results with faraway Pioneer are the same. And really, no surprise here. This was just a basic test to see whether the designs work at all. By the way, if you want to see the results in detail, the raw footage from the experiments is available on my second channel, Cyril Has Played, and I will probably put a link somewhere in the corner here unless I forget about it. Next up, the clocked output challenge. For this, we shut down our sinks and let the products pile up in the output buffers to make everything come to a halt. Then we reattach the outputs and wait to see how quickly the production line recovers to full efficiency. My first check was after 5 minutes. By then, production was not back at 100% efficiency yet, so I decided to wait a bit longer. After 10 minutes, normal operations were restored across the board. The valve-only and mergeless design fall behind a bit here because of their slow recovery time. The VIP junction and headlift reset design can both pick and choose whether they want to use fresh water or byproduct water. So if there's any kind of disruption, they can just switch to the other type of input to recover quickly. On the other hand, the valve option and the mergeless option use a set split between fresh water and byproduct water. So if either of them gets disrupted, it takes a bit of time for them to recover. I don't think that's a big deal per se, but if you have a production line that's going to start and stop a lot, that's going to be something to keep in mind. Since no one has been knocked out yet, it comes down to the final round, the missing input challenge. This is like the opposite of the previous test. We detach all the incoming ore supply and wait for the production lines to run out of material. When everything has come to a full stop, we bring back the inputs and wait for production to recover. When checking after 5 minutes, everything looked sort of similar to the previous challenge, except that the VIP junction was performing much worse this time. Last time it was already back over 95% efficiency, and this time more like 50%. But maybe waiting for a few more minutes would fix this. Nope. At 8 minutes 40 seconds after the inputs were reattached, the production line with VIP junction just failed entirely. As you can see here, all refineries on this line have their output buffers entirely filled up, so nothing can move anymore. Every other candidate passed this challenge though. What an upset! The VIP junction is from the plumbing manual, and the plumbing manual is famous for a reason, so I really expected this design to work. But if anything, this goes to show that my reservations about this design were warranted. If I cannot explain a design, that means I don't understand it. And if I don't understand it, that means I won't be able to diagnose problems like this blockage. Where would you even begin to fix this problem? The only idea that I have is that maybe I built the junction wrong. In fact, hey, can we get the junction back on screen, please? If you see anything that might be wrong about this build, please let me know in the comments, because surely this cannot be how it's supposed to behave in the face of a simple challenge like this. Also, if you want to play around with this design or any of the other candidate designs, please visit the link on screen or in the description. Over there you can find my save files and blueprints both for this test setup as well as the completed build. As it stands, the VIP junction is the only candidate to earn a failing grade. All the other designs have their merits. The headlift reset design by Jinky Rain boasts quick recovery times after external disruption, and the fill level on the fluid buffer provides insight into the balance of the water cycle. If you can fit the fluid buffer into your build without breaking your layout, go with this design that is certified nifty. Of course, a simple valve is more compact than an entire industrial fluid buffer. I guess that this design is not usually recommended because you need to make sure to tweak the valve setting whenever you add, remove or overclock machines. But I know that I wouldn't be doing that on my build. And also I don't care about the slow recovery time that much, so I went with this design that is certified clean. And finally, I've already recommended the mergeless design because it's literally impossible to clog. If you can live with putting down one more production machine, go with this design that is certified boring. And I don't mean boring in a negative way here. When you play Satisfactory, or really when you do anything in life, you always have the fun stuff that you really want to do and the boring chores that you need to get there. If fluid management is the thing that excites you and you want to tinker around with all these weird junction designs, go crazy and have fun. But if fluid management is just a chore for you and you just need to move water from one location to the other, go with the boring solution that we know works and get to the fun stuff faster. And speaking of what's really important, I have not showed you around my final build yet. Let's end the video on that. Since all bauxite is located along the middle east-west axis of the map, my main railway line follows this path. Here in the Red Jungle, and also in the Titan Forest, I have trains collecting locally sourced ore. Same in the Lake Forest, but this region also has crude oil, which I refine into a ridiculous amount of plastic. If you have seen my power station design, this will look familiar. We take in crude oil and water at the very top. This gets turned to rubber and fuel, which is then further refined into plastic on the bottom layer. I may not be good at the artistic part of architecture, but I do take pride in hiding the messy belting to make the outside look nice, even if it's a little tedious. By the way, this is not enough plastic yet, so there's another plastic factory at the Blue Crater. Between this and the two power stations, I've used up over 90% of crude oil deposits that are in the game. All the ores and the plastic are transported by train, and as you can see, I was not interested in making a particularly clever railway setup. It's just straight lines all around, with cloverleaf intersections connecting the branches to the main line. The only clever bit is that the main line is below the branch lines, so that full trains always go down, following gravity, and only empty trains go up, against gravity. Besides bauxite ore, coal, sulfur and plastic, I also need copper ingots. I found those easiest to make in the Dune Desert because of its rich abundance of basic metals. All of this gets delivered to the swamp at the east edge of the map. Final assembly is over here, mostly because it is a conveniently located open area with ample water. It may not be as obvious from this perspective, but some of these train platforms are over 250 meters long. Playing with the new flight mode on this build has really wrecked my sense of scale. So this is what it feels like to play Factorio. And speaking of other games, I've noticed this before, but the swamp is the most obvious example of how the game uses color grading to give each biome a unique atmosphere. When I started building here, this reminded me of another of my favorite games, Hollow Knight. Even though it's a completely different art style, this title also uses color filters to mark the shift from one area to the next. Moving on to final assembly, our miners, trains and branch factories have assembled for us a plentiful feast of over 40,000 items per minute. I wanted to use this belt highway as the centerpiece, so the assembly steps are arranged to its left and right. On the left, or rather on the east side, bauxite starts getting processed into aluminum. This is where I used my chosen design, Just a Valve. By the way, Just a Valve, also the setup for my video game library. Once the aluminum completes its magical transformation from bauxite to alumina, to scrap, to ingots, to alclad sheets, it enters the final leg of its journey, which is also the final leg of our journey. After a victory lap around the refineries, the alclad sheets unite with plastic, copper and sulfur to turn into 4,560 batteries per minute. Imagine all the possibilities with this much power. We could fuel hundreds of trucks, an army of drones. Never mind, that sounds too complicated. Let's just sink 'em. Bye!